Coming in fall 2026, or autumn as I like to call it, Insomniac Games will be aiming to redefine what a superhero game can be. There will be no web slinging, there will be no daytime heroics. This is going to be raw claws, brutal violence, and fractured memories. This is Wolverine, Insomniac's next leap into the Marvel universe. In this video, we'll dig into everything we know so far: release details, gameplay, narrative, comic lore, and the new technical challenges that the devs are going to have to overcome to bring Logan's world to life. Insomniac and Sony have confirmed a fall/autumn 2026 release window for Marvel's Wolverine, and this game is being built exclusively for the PS5. There isn't going to be a PS4 port. The PlayStation blog emphasizes that this is going to be a ground-up experience for the PS5, so they'll be taking advantage of all of that technology.
It is a level of detail that we've never been able to do before.
You could see it in the trailer. You can see pores. You can see blood in between the little lines of his teeth. I love the attention to detail.
It's exciting that we're going to be able to bring that kind of fidelity to players.
The Wolverine games exist in the same continuity as the previous Spider-Man and Miles Morales games that were also created by Insomniac. However, this is billed as a standalone game and standalone story, so you won't have had to have played the Spider-Man or Miles Morales games to jump into this one. Although unlikely, the idea of some kind of crossover is definitely on people's minds, but we have to remember these are really opposing worlds and games. Spider-Man is light and agile, and Wolverine is dark and feral. What's much more likely than a direct crossover is seeing some cameos and potentially Easter eggs from the Spider-Man and Miles Morales games. One of the most talked about differences between Wolverine and previous Insomniac titles is a huge shift in tone. Wolverine is being billed as a much more violent, visceral, and bloody affair than the previous Spider-Man games, which tended to avoid any outright fatal or gruesome violence. Even in the reveal trailer, there was a brutal moment where Wolverine's claws pierce an enemy's skull, and even internally, they were questioning whether that might be too much. Wolverine as a character sits on the other end of the spectrum from Spider-Man. Whereas Peter Parker tries to avoid lethal force and collateral damage, Logan is driven by rage, instinct, and necessity. Logan is much more willing to cross lines that Spider-Man wouldn't, and because of that, this game is going to lean into much more brutal violence. We're talking gore, dismemberment, blood spatters, and visceral finishes. The hope is that that doesn't overtake the narrative of the story. Talking of gore, dismemberment, and blood, the devs have talked openly about a new blood tech system that exceeds previous capabilities. It seems odd to talk about showing blood in terms of technical advancements, but the devs have said they're going to be able to show the fine details that were previously unavailable to them. We're talking about blood on cloth, in between teeth, staining surfaces, dripping, pooling, everything you can think of. There's even talk about blood dynamically affecting the environment. So that could be anything from blood pooling on the floor to splatters on the wall to footprints that you leave that enemies can follow or you can follow to track down enemies. Because Wolverine's fighting mechanics are such close quarters, the fidelity of these effects is going to have to be very high in order to avoid breaking the immersion. In terms of the technical challenges of blood and gore, there are so many to talk about. First of all, you've got the real-time physics and volumetric fluids, which are just computationally heavy on their own, and then you've got the question of what you do with all of this blood over time. Logan's going to get into some pretty big fights with lots of people, so the liters are going to top up very, very quickly. Are you just going to let that dry up, or is it mysteriously going to wash away? Then you've got to think about how all of this blood flying about interacts and collides with different characters and surfaces. How will it look on a tiled floor versus a mirror? And then in terms of gore, if you want to show someone's skin splitting apart and their brain popping out, you're going to have layered character models that can reveal different elements dynamically as they're torn apart. Let's talk a little bit about the origins of Wolverine and how they might play a part in this game. A big part of the narrative hook here is that Logan is not a stable or self-aware hero. His memories are fractured and he is in pursuit of answers at all costs. The devs describe Logan as an unreliable narrator, and his gaps in his memory, his internal conflicts, and his hallucinations or his flashbacks are probably going to be central to the narrative of this game. A lot of what we've heard so far is that Logan is guided by trauma trauma, his missing memories, and a desperate need to find out who he really is. Because Wolverine's history is so deeply rooted in memory loss, identity crisis, and conflicting versions of events, it's likely for me that the game is going to lean into that. As players, I think we'll be questioning whether events are actually real, whether we're being manipulated, and whether we're misremembering key facts. Everything we've seen and heard about the game so far seems to be supported by the comic book lore. In the comic books, Wolverine has a famously convoluted history. He's had multiple identities in Logan and James Hewlett. His mental state has been altered by Weapon X, by trauma, mind wipes, memory manipulation, and he's often been portrayed as a living weapon, someone who was born into violence and forced into roles that he didn't choose. Wolverine is almost never a pure classic hero archetype. His motivations are messy, burdened, and often reluctant. In their marketing, Insomniac has described Logan as a living weapon forged against his will. More often than not, Wolverine doesn't want to save the day but has no choice, and often sees that if he doesn't act, who will? We've talked about the character Logan or Wolverine, but what about the man behind the character? As is mandatory by law, Wolverine has to be played by an Australian. I'm not sure why, but it does keep happening, and this time the Australian is Liam McIntyre. Insomniac have confirmed he's doing both the voice acting and the performance capture for the game, and he has described it as being one of his biggest responsibilities and one of the coolest things he's ever had the opportunity to do. Liam McIntyre already has an amazing pedigree within the video game industry. He's been in Jedi Fallen Order, and he's been in Gears of War 4 and 5. If you don't recognise him from those two, maybe you recognise him from the Flash TV series or in Spartacus, where he played Spartacus. Liam McIntyre has a history of physically intense and emotionally fraught roles, especially with Spartacus, so it looks like he's going to bring some of that intensity to the Wolverine role. With Liam in this role, we shouldn't just expect flashy fight scenes and gratuitous violence, we should expect a character that is nuanced, flawed, multifaceted, and intense. I'm super excited to see what he brings to this role. In the trailer, we also see some other characters that you might recognise and others that might be a little bit more obscure. First of all, we've got Mystique or Raven Darkhölme, the sometimes anti-hero, sometimes antagonist, sometimes ally. It's unclear yet what role Mystique will play in the game, or whether she'll be a playable character in the same way that MJ was in the Spider-Man games, but what's for certain is that Logan won't know whether he's able to trust her. Another character from the trailer that you might be less aware of is Omega Red or Arkady Rossovich, a Russian mutant that has ties to Project X and anti-mutant agendas. He literally has the ability to suck the life force from people using his carbonadium coils, tentacle-like appendages that come out of his arms, and looks like he's going to be one of Logan's more formidable enemies in the game. Another enemy faction that's been confirmed within the game are the Reavers, which have a well-established lore within the X-Men universe. They first appeared in X-Men comic books in 1988 and are portrayed as cybernetically enhanced mercenaries or cyborg villains which have a vendetta against the X-Men and Wolverine specifically. My view is that these guys are going to be seen in fairly large groups performing a variety of villainous activities throughout the game, and your job will be to clear them out and stop them from doing whatever it is that they're trying to do. These will be your kind of mid-tier enemies, everyday criminals that shouldn't be hard to take on their own, but can be problematic when they're in larger groups. There is one more antagonist that we need to talk about who's a lot more mysterious because we only saw a glimpse of them in the game and they're yet to be confirmed. I'm talking about the giant purple robot that some fans are speculating could be Master Mold. So let's talk about who Master Mold is and what role they might play in the game. Master Mold is a Sentinel super robot originally created by Bolivar Trask, whose role is to build, coordinate and control other Sentinels. It's often extremely large and imbued with autonomous intelligence, so it's more than just a drone. It is a central brain for all of the Sentinel units. As a large purple robot, it does match the aesthetic of some of the renditions of Master Mold in the comic books, and with the presence of other anti-mutant or mutant hunting units like the Reavers and like the Sentinels, it does seem plausible that that big purple robot could in fact be Master Mold or some other kind of variant of that character. The fact that Insomniac haven't revealed who that character is yet could mean it is one of the final bosses, or certainly one of the most difficult enemies that you're going to come up against in the Wolverine game. There are 3 confirmed locations in the Wolverine game. You've got Mandripoor, which is a fictional island in Southeast Asia. You have the wilderness of Canada, and you have Tokyo. Mandripoor is a recurring location within X-Men lore and is often portrayed as a kind of pirate haven or a hub for the criminal underworld and a place of moral ambiguity. In terms of the wilderness of Canada, Wolverine has strong ties to the Canadian wilderness. In fact, he grew up in a frontier family in Canada. In the comic books and films, he often retreats to these wilderness places to isolate himself, heal, meditate, or even just hide from his enemies. In terms of Tokyo and Japan in general, Wolverine has really strong ties here. He lived there for extended periods of time and even had romantic relationships in that region. In many of his stories, his time in Japan is one of the most personal and emotional phases of the Wolverine story, but he still does have strong ties with the criminal underworld and has even faced the Yakuza and ninja threats in that region. Because of Insomniac's pedigree in the Marvel Universe, and even with games like Ratchet & Clank, there are some hallmarks that we can probably expect to see in this game, despite Wolverine being a significant tone shift from their previous installments. Insomniac has said that the game will retain their staples, so we're talking fast, fluid, ferocious combat, action-packed set pieces, and strong storytelling. However, they have emphasized that Wolverine will have its own look and mood. This is not going to be just a reskinned Spidey engine. But what is Insomniac famous for, and how might that manifest itself in the Wolverine game? One of the wonderful things about the Spider-Man games are the cinematic cutscenes and the seamless gameplay. The cutscenes flow directly into gameplay, and combat is integrated directly with Traversal. In Wolverine, I think it's likely that we'll see cutscenes flow directly into playable combat, and that exploring old memories will suddenly become gameplay. Traversal might be a more difficult challenge for Insomniac in this game because they don't have the web slinging available to them that allows you to move so wonderfully around such a large map and was so easy to integrate fast travel with. I want to talk in a little bit more detail about how I think Insomniac might deal with those traversal issues with Wolverine having to go across such large distances very quickly, but for now let's move on to the next point. Another thing that the Spider-Man games did so well were these contextual combos and situational attacks, and I think we'll see that reappear again in the Wolverine games. You'll be able to pick things up off the ground to use as weapons. You might even be able to slash elements of the environment to create hazards for your enemies. Open mission structure and side content is another staple of Insomniac's Spider-Man games, and I think we'll see that within Wolverine. In fact, I think he's custom built for it. I imagine that at least one of the side missions will be going around to try and find memory fragments from Wolverine's past to try and complete his story. As well as that, you could have hidden labs, hidden lore spots, hidden character interactions, as well as mutant side missions. Whether they'll make any secondary characters playable, like I said earlier, Mystique would be perfect for that, especially if you've got a mission that needs completing that requires stealth and infiltration, where Wolverine is just not going to be as good at that. One of the other things that Insomniac is great at is accessibility, scalability, and pushing hardware as far as you possibly can while still maintaining performance, which is going to be especially important in this game with all the high fidelity assets that are going to be required to get that blood and gore looking exactly as they want it to. We may see in the game options that you can reduce things like gore intensity, camera shake, and also options for things like color blindness, etc. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about traversal and fast travel, because we already know that Wolverine can't shoot webs from his hands, but he is going to have to be traveling large distances to all of these different places that have been confirmed within the game. As I said before, traveling around the map and seamless fast travel are going to be much more of a challenge in this game than they were in the Spider-Man games. Spider-Man and Miles Morales have this natural way of being able to move quickly across large distances, and they really refined the fast travel capabilities in Spider-Man 2 with the web sling and the wingsuit, which allowed you to travel vast distances very, very quickly. But Wolverine doesn't have any of those capabilities, so how will Insomniac manage fast travel and travel in general in a game where you can't just sling a web wherever you want to? There are a couple of obvious options that should fit the bill. Although Wolverine can't just shoot webs out of his wrists, he is still athletic, so a parkourish like traversal system may be on the cards. Things like climbing buildings, clawing your way up, getting onto ledges, using pipes, all of that kind of stuff is definitely on the table. There's even the potential that they could have claw-based hook attachments or grapple hooks that would allow him to swing in a limited way, in a similar way that we saw in the Arkham games. But what about slightly larger distances? We've already seen Logan riding a motorcycle in the trailer, so vehicles seems like it might be an obvious option, but what about other mounts and beasts? Don't tell me you wouldn't love to see Wolverine riding a moose through the wilderness of Canada. Even with that, this game is described as a global thrill ride, and we know there are at least 3 different locations in 3 different countries that Wolverine is going to appear in, so at some point he's going to need to learn to fly, unless of course they make him have the ability to swim very, very fast. But don't forget, Mystique is in this game, and that gives us a gateway into all of the equipment that is used by the X-Men, so maybe we'll see the Blackbird, the X-Jet, come into play, and that's how Wolverine will get from country to country. It may be that some of these abilities are unlocked as you play the game. Things like double jumps and dashes may be a part of a traversal skill tree that we haven't seen in the UI yet. One of the things that Insomniac has done so well in previous games is making traversal feel seamless, even as you're entering different parts of the map. Especially in Spider-Man 2, there were no pauses, there were no load screens, everything just worked as if it was one big area. So that's going to be a challenge within Wolverine, but there is the potential that hallucinations or flashbacks suddenly become part of the game, and as opposed to actually traveling physically on a jet or something of that kind, you're actually just moving from location to location through flashbacks, through hallucinations and various other mechanics like that. If it's not that, then maybe they will use more of a classic fast travel mechanic where there are certain nodes or waypoints that allow you to fast travel to other nodes that you've already discovered around the map, but that doesn't seem in line with what Insomniac have previously produced. The final option, which could feel a little bit more tedious, is some kind of auto-pathing capability. If they want to make the world still feel like it's completely open, or if you want to take unusual routes to a place, there's the potential to have an auto-pathing feature that allows Logan to move around more complex terrain without going through traditional routes. In short, it's likely that they're going to combine multiple techniques to allow you to travel short, medium and large distances, and depending on what kind of distance you travel, you may do everything from parkour to jumping on a vehicle to jumping in a plane to choosing a waypoint to having a flashback. Who knows what they're going to do, but I'm excited to see how they make it seamless in a game that travels across multiple cities around the world. Insomniac's Wolverine is shaping up to be one of the most ambitious superhero games yet. Built from the ground up for PS5, drenched in visceral detail and centered on a hero whose past is fractured and methods are brutal. With villains like Mystique, Omega Red, the Reavers and maybe even a Sentinel Master like Master Mold, the stakes are higher than ever. And with Liam McIntyre bringing Logan's story to life, I think we can expect more than just claws and carnage. This is going to be a performance that grounds Wolverine's pain, rage and reluctant heroism. If you enjoyed this deep dive, then don't forget to hit that like, subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss future updates. And let me know down in the comments what you're most excited about. Is it the brutal combat? Is it Mystique's potential deception? Or is it Liam McIntyre's take on Wolverine? Also, if you think I've missed any key points here, if you've got any predictions that you want to share, let me know down in the comments and let's talk about it.